I made this comic in less than 1 month with no experience, and in this video, I'll share the steps that I took so you can do it too. Hi, my name is Oyun Orka, a VTuber who tries to draw, and while I'm mainly an illustrator, I have no experience with comics or manga. Despite that, I've always wanted to make one, but just never got around to it, so when I saw that Clip Studio Paint partnered with Manga Draft for a global comics contest, I knew I had to enter. I think for a lot of beginners wanting to start anything new, the biggest hurdle is to just get started, so if you're having trouble motivating yourself to start, and especially to finish something, entering contests can be helpful because there's usually guidelines for entries, like page limits or entry themes, and you'll also have to submit your entry before the deadline. By the time I upload this, the current contest will already probably be about over, but Clip Studio Paint seems to be hosting the Global Comic Awards pretty often, so you can check their site for current contests. So without further ado, let's get straight into drafting the story. So storytelling and writing in general isn't my forte, but thankfully I had a starting point to jump off of given the contest theme of legend. When I heard the theme, I initially wasn't sure of any ideas, but given my background as an illustrator, I had a vague idea of wanting to draw a legend focused around a stormy lighthouse scene and a woman standing in the rain, so I decided to try and make a story around that. If you're struggling with ideas, I think it's helpful to leverage your own unique skills or experiences into your stories. For example, I went on a trip earlier this year and saw some cool lighthouses and beaches, and I also regularly do standalone illustrations, so for me personally, starting around an illustration idea and then developing that idea into a story was easiest for me. So with that vague idea in mind, I began to write out a script. When writing scripts, there's a lot of story structures that you can follow. Common ones include the 3-act structure consisting of the setup, confrontation, and resolution, the hero's journey, which has so many steps that I won't be getting into all of them, and Kisho Tenketsu, which consists of the introduction, development, a twist, and then a conclusion. This story format is common in East Asian poems and stories, and given the theme of legend, I decided to follow this for the main story structure. There's a lot more story structures not limited to these, and you can follow any, but I feel like for short one-shots like the ones I'll be making here, a simpler story structure like this one or the 3-act structure would fit best. So with a vague idea in mind, I began to write out a script in a Google document and section it out into 3 parts: the contest rules, the draft notes, and the script. In the rules section, this is just a copy and paste from the contest rules so that I'm always clear about the theme, guidelines, and deadline for the competition. Meanwhile, for the draft notes section, this is essentially where I treat this as a brain dump outside of the main script and where I do most of the initial story planning. I write down random notes here, draft ideas, initial legend ideas, and anything goes basically. And finally, we have the script section where I plan out what happens and what's said on each page. I break down each page so that new dialogues are separated by a new line, and if I have a clear vision for how the panel should look like while I'm scripting, I'll also make notes about it as I go. The rest of the writing process is pretty boring, and mostly just about figuring out the general flow of the story. I also change and move things around later on when I get into storyboarding. Speaking of storyboarding, being able to tell a story effectively through comic format is definitely a skill that I've learned, but certainly haven't perfected. So, if you want to learn from professionals, check out the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. On the topic of effective storytelling, The Art of Visual Storytelling, How Comics Work by Phil Jimenez and the Smithsonian team goes into fantastic depth on how to effectively tell stories through a visual format. This class covers how to analyze basic page structure, find relevant references, and ways to most effectively tell your story visually. It's a short class, but filled with so much valuable information. Or, if you need more technical help, Introduction to Clip Studio Paint, Comics and Manga Tool Basics for Beginners by Asia Noble goes into fantastic depth on how to use tools within Clip Studio Paint, like the paneling features and vector layers, for line art to speed up your drawing process. If you need help on how to use tools within Clip Studio Paint for mangas and comics, this is a fantastic class to take. And if you have no experience with drawing at all and just want to learn how to draw from scratch, there are tons of learning paths, classes, and even digital products to help you out on Skillshare. So, if you're interested in learning on Skillshare, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today! Now, with our deepened understanding of visual storytelling through Skillshare courses, let's move on to storyboarding a comic. So before jumping straight into storyboarding, I first draw all the character references and plan out colors. Since this is a black and white comic, and I'm following more of a manga format, this will be done only with values, and I try to limit myself to a scale of values to represent how in black and white comics or manga, you're limited to a set amount of screen tones. But if I were to redo this, I would probably limit this even further, that way the value groups are stronger. Next, when it comes to storyboarding, a big part of it for me was figuring out the paneling and order. Although I had the script written down, effective paneling is definitely a skill that I'm still a beginner in, and since I didn't have any experience in it, what helped me personally was looking at other manga that I liked and trying to imitate how they did paneling and set up scenes. For pretty much all the manga that I saw, artists tend to group their panels into 2 or 3 primary sections, which help with readability, especially if there's a lot of panels on page. Also, text and important objects would generally follow in order. For Japanese manga, it would follow more of an S shape since they're read right to left, up to down. However, since my comic is written in English, I'm following English writing practices, so starting left to right, up to down, and for good page flow, I should generally keep the text and important objects in a Z shape. Another really important thing to keep in mind was the edges and gutters. A lot of Japanese manga artists tend to pull some of their panels to the edges for emphasis or for better flow, but even if the images are drawn to the edges, text and important objects should be kept away from the borders, and the middle of the pages should always be kept blank unless it was a double-page spread. After generally getting the basics down for paneling, I went ahead and storyboarded the rest of the comic. I just want to say, for beginners, whatever time you've allotted to storyboarding, definitely at least double it. I spent way longer on storyboarding than anticipated, mostly since without the experience of paneling, I was constantly revising and changing things. Although I generally sketch pretty quickly, it took me an entire week just to storyboard 15 pages. Considering that I line even slower, I was really worried about not making the deadline, so that leads us into part 3, which is using resources. To start off, as I was storyboarding, I realized it would take me quite a bit of time to line both the lighthouse exterior and interior every single time, since there was a lot of scenes with it pictured. So instead of doing it manually, I decided to relearn SKETCHUP and started to model out a lighthouse. I've used SKETCHUP in the past, but only very briefly, though thankfully there are a lot of resources online on how to use it. After I finish modeling out the main lighthouse, I model out the attached house, and then start to paint materials before realizing that I'm getting a bit ahead of myself and that this will all be black and white anyways. After modeling the exterior of the lighthouse, I found out that through the Styles feature on SKETCHUP, I can turn the default SKETCHUP model into a hand-drawn sketchy style, which can then be used directly as the background and save me a ton of time, which I'm super thankful for. Since modeling the exterior alone took me quite some time, I decided to look online for more assets for SKETCHUP Make, before realizing that, unfortunately, the free desktop version of SKETCHUP Make 2017 that I was using is no longer supported or even available for download. Thankfully, there's still at least an online free version of SKETCHUP. I was able to find a download for SKETCHUP Make 2017 through the Internet Archive, which I've linked in the description, but I didn't test the download myself, so download at your own risk. And here's the final 3D model of the interior using models from the 3D warehouse. Now that I've finished modeling the interior too, I just want to briefly mention that before I move into drawing, I used a ton of resources to actually draw my pages. Almost all of these resources are from the Studio Asset Store, and there's a lot here, so feel free to pause or screenshot if you need it. All links will also be in the description down below. So now, let's finally get into actually drawing the pages. This is by far the part that took me the longest, and ironically the part that I have the least commentary about. Generally, I just try to line according to the storyboard, add hatching using the brushes that I mentioned earlier, and made sure that the characters are clearly visible and have good contrast between it and the background. I also occasionally used hatching brushes between the background and the character if necessary, especially in the rainy scenes that I drew, but generally, this process was mostly about keeping myself motivated and accountable to do a big project over several days. I made sure to give myself breaks and set realistic goals, which for me was getting about a page done each day. I did extra pages on the days I had extra time and motivation, so that on certain days, if I got busy with work or other things, I could still make the deadline. Overall, for a time breakdown of the entire project, it took me about 3 days to write the script, 7 days for the storyboard, and 18 days for finishing all 15 pages, for a total time of 28 days, just under 1 month from start to finish. So to summarize, if you also want to draw your own comic or manga and want to follow my same steps, Step 1 would be drafting a story based on a simple story structure like the 3-act structure or Kisho Tenketsu, and then separate that story into a page-by-page script. Next, storyboard out all the pages and panels ensuring that they have clear flow and that any text and important visuals is within the readable margins. Once everything is storyboarded, prepare any assets that you need like fonts, hatching brushes, or 3D backgrounds, and then move into drawing all the pages. Be sure to give yourself plenty of time during this step. Finally, double check the finished pages and then you're done. Here are the finished pages. I'll flip through them and you can mute the video and pause it to read it, or you can read it from the link in the pinned comment down below. While I flip through this, I feel like people can certainly tell that an amateur comic artist drew it. I definitely put more effort into the first page than a lot of the other pages, and I wish I kept that same quality throughout. Though unfortunately, I had to rush a few pages in order to make the deadline. However, if I ever make another comic or manga in the future, I feel like I'll be more prepared having gone through it at least once. Either way, I'm happy that I was able to complete it on time. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this video helpful. This took an absolutely insane amount of time to put together, so if you found it helpful, please like the video and subscribe if you'd like to see more from my channel. Also, if you want to learn more about how I draw interior backgrounds, check out the video linked on screen here. I'll see you next time. Bye bye!